Let's speak with Lord Toby Young, Conservative PM, Vice Chair of the All Party Parliamentary Group on free speech and, of course, founder of the Free Speech Union. Toby, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. Now, of course, you were well behind this case. Was this an issue for you? Was it solely an issue of free speech, or was there the injustice component attached to this as well, or are they intrinsically linked?
Well, I think they're linked. I think the fact that she received such a severe sentence for what was, to my mind, a fairly minor speech offence, I think is what makes it such an extraordinary case. I mean, yes, she tweeted something that was indefensible, and she has made no attempt to defend it herself. She deleted it within less than 4 hours and apologised for it after she'd had time to reflect. So it wasn't a nice thing to have said. She wrongly blamed the Southport murders, and this was on the day of the Southport murders that she posted this. She wrongly blamed them on an asylum seeker, as many people did at the time, because there was this information vacuum. We didn't know anything about the suspect, and she posted this rant about illegal immigrants. And as I say, she almost immediately regretted it, deleted it, apologised for it. But in the interim, someone had taken a screenshot, reported it to the police. She was duly arrested, denied bail, prosecuted, and sentenced to 31 months in jail, more than 2.5 years. Yeah. What's so extraordinary about it is that what we would think of, I think, what anyone would think of as more serious offences, receive lower sentences. So some people who actually were convicted pleaded guilty to participating in the riots last summer, received significantly lower sentences. People convicted for being members of rape gangs for offences like having sex with child prostitutes have been convicted for less than 2.5 years. Or rather less than 31 months. There were, I think, 4 people in the a grooming gang case in Telford in 2013. 7 people pleaded guilty to various child sexual exploitation offences, and 4 of them received 2.5 years, which is 1 month less than the sentence meted out to Lucy Connolly. So it is extraordinary that the law and our courts should believe that it's perfectly just that someone should get more than 2.5 years, a more severe sentence for a single speech offence than for pleading guilty to child sexual exploitation.
Indeed. And I spent a long time speaking to lawyers, trying to get to the bottom of whether there was a word handed down to the judiciary, to judges during this time. It does seem that not just Lucy Connolly, but others were given custodial sentences where perhaps if they'd been a week before, they might not have done. I'm always reminded that in 2011, the London riots, a similar thing happened. So would you be satisfied, and again, I have no evidence of this, but would you be satisfied that people were sentenced with the riot thing in mind, that was the sort of the factor here, even if we can't find anyone that will say that out loud and agree that some word was sent to judges?
Well, I don't know whether, the word came down from on high, but certainly Sir Keir Starmer was making noises during the period of social disorder last summer, in which he was urging the police to arrest people, urging the courts to come down on them with the full force of the law. And even if no word did come down from on high to the judge in this particular case, he must have been aware that the courts were expected to effectively throw the book at people who had pleaded guilty to speech offences in connection with the Southport murders, as well as people guilty of rioting. Although, as I say, people who pleaded guilty to, participating in violent disorder received lower sentences, not in every case, but in some cases, than Lucy Connolly did.
Indeed. And I was just going to say, Toby, I do wonder sometimes about the quality of our judges? I know we all sort of sit there, looking at these impressive men and women with wigs and gavels and, often, lovely backstories of their journey to the top, etc., and assume they are the Oracle of Delphi when it comes to, matters legal and otherwise. We defer to them because of this sort of greatness of position. But when I read the Court of Appeal ruling that the judges there had said there is no arguable basis on which it could be said that the sentence imposed by the judge was manifestly excessive, I would argue that demonstrably, evidently it was excessive by any measure.
Yes, I mean, that's certainly how it seems at first blush. I mean, the argument made in the Court of Appeal last week, I was there for the hearing for some of it, was that, first of all, Lucy Connolly was poorly advised by her solicitor and accepted culpability, a level of culpability which she shouldn't have accepted, without realizing what the implications were as far as the sentencing was concerned. The Court of Appeal rejected that argument. And the other argument made by her barrister, paid for by the Free Speech Union, Adam King, the other argument made was that the judge should have taken mitigating factors into account, like the fact that she'd lost a 19-month-old child herself, so found the murders of these three schoolgirls particularly triggering and upsetting, and also the fact that she had deleted the tweet and apologized for it within hours of posting it, and it just didn't take those mitigating factors into account, and the Court of Appeal didn't think there was any reason why he should have done. And I think the Court of Appeal are often quite reluctant to, by implication, criticise their colleagues.
Of course.
I think one of the pieces of advice that the Free Speech Union gives to its members, should they ever find themselves arrested and charged for a speech crime, is, if at all possible, plead not guilty.
Yeah.
And ask for a jury trial. Sometimes it's an option. Most of the people, literally a majority of the people who have been prosecuted for speech offences in connection with the Southport murders, who've pleaded not guilty, and very few did, but of those who did, a majority have been acquitted by juries. Yeah,
indeed. And just on the wider point of the Free Speech Union, I know you represent and have an interest in cases, whether they're left-wing, right-wing, you don't discriminate on that basis. It's about free speech. The bit that seems to get lost in all of this, there's a lot of people write stupid things, inane things, sometimes a bit offensive stuff on social media. Being an idiot is not a criminal offence. I mean, that should be said. And I sort of sense that all of these things are getting lost. I don't know how we lost our minds on this one, that, somebody who's a half-wit and writes something, whatever somebody thinks of Lucy Connolly, no one's defending the original tweet, etc. But in any other world, none of that would be a point of arrest, let alone going to jail. For being an idiot does not normally carry a custodial sentence. Otherwise, we'd have a far bigger problem with prisons on our hand than we currently do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two explanations for the fact that, the book is being thrown at people who say silly things on social media. A charitable explanation and an uncharitable one. The charitable one is that the Prime Minister and the courts, prosecutors, they genuinely believe that tweets like Lucy Connolly's contribute to outbreaks of serious disorder. They believe that there's a causal connection between things people say on social media and outbreaks of social disorder. And that's their rationale for coming down so hard on people who say things that you and I would dismiss as silly and not worthy of prosecution. The less charitable explanation is that this is just a convenient way of silencing dissent.
Yeah.
They don't want people to vent their rage about uncontrolled mass immigration, about the fact that we cannot control or defend our borders, because they think that they don't like that point of view. They morally disapprove of it, and they want to shut people up who articulate that point of view. And one argument for suggesting it may be more the second, not the first, is that people who say equally silly, intemperate things on Twitter, but from a left-of-centre perspective, what we consider a left-wing perspective, often don't find themselves in nearly such deep trouble as people who say things that we consider right-wing. It's nearly always people the kind of authorities, the regime, the government disapproves of intensely because they've challenged some shibboleth of progressive radical ideology that get into the most trouble.
Sadly, you're spot on, I sense, Toby, on this. Listen, we will watch with interest, but of course, I think I'm right in saying that it's now going to be August before she comes out of jail.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Lord Toby Young, thank you. Conservative peer, Vice Chair of the All Party Parliamentary Group on Free Speech and founder of the Free Speech Union. They have been backing this case for a long time. We can argue forever about the content of the tweet. It was, I'll come back to what I said last week. What makes somebody write that? I have no idea what kind of character would write that, based on the fact that there was a rumour going around on Twitter. I mean, who looks at Twitter and believes a tweet from Bob in Arbroath or some other half-wit who chucked somebody up going, yeah, it was a Channel migrant that committed this crime, and that kind of flared it all up. And then, you know, lots of other people went to jail. Some people nearly went to jail for repeating it, etc. And none of this was clever stuff, and it was all, you know, pretty grubby and misinformation and fake news. And suddenly there was a whole lava of confusion around this. Oh my God, look, so I'm going to respond to it. I mean, she could have just checked and discovered there was no evidence for what it was. But again, that might make her stupid, but that's not a criminal offence. I can get the sensitivities around this. There's no trouble in understanding that, despite what Toby just said, I mean, it is possible you could incite something via social media. Of course you could. You know, a gathering that would turn nasty, but it's possible. However, in this particular case, where there's no other example of her tweeting something like this, she has her own backstory. I know courts say that that is, you know, largely irrelevant. Did you commit the crime or not? But yes, I did. OK, well, your other circumstances may well be troubling. And, you know, perhaps some people would have a sympathy with that, but it's not literally relevant to what happened here. So I get that as well. What I don't get is how anybody conjured up a sentence of 31 months. And I will compound that confusion by the appeal court judges today, 3 of them, that said they can't see any reason. They were their actual words. They literally cannot see any, no arguable basis, they said, I'm quoting here, on which it could be said, so no arguable basis on which it could be said that the sentence imposed by the judge was excessive. I don't even know how to begin to answer that, because by any level, that is excessive.